Hello everyone! Today, we're going to watch the journey of restoring the rear of a car that was damaged in an accident, bringing it back to its original beauty. First, he carefully removes the trunk lid and both rear taillights, allowing him to access the damaged sections more easily. Next, he moves to the car's interior, where he begins by removing the back row seats. He used a vacuum to suck up the broken glass in the trunk. He locates the bolts, securing the rear bumper to the vehicle, and begins to unscrew them. As the car rises, he carefully positions safety stands beneath the vehicle to provide extra stability during the repair process. He uses a hydraulic puller, which is a powerful tool designed to exert force in a controlled manner, allowing him to pull and reshape the metal back into its original form. In addition to the hydraulic tool, he employs several other implements to assist in the straightening process. He uses a punch and hammer to tap on stubborn areas that need a little more persuasion, emphasizing the need for precision. Once the rear frame is straightened, the technician shifts his focus to repositioning the rear taillights. He carefully reattaches the hydraulic puller to the areas surrounding the light mounts, ensuring that he has the right angle for the pull. As he begins to pull, he monitors the movement closely, making sure the metal is yielding without warping further. Once the taillights are aligned, he switches back to his trusty hammer and punch to tackle any stubborn dents around the mounts. With each precise strike, he works to gently coax the metal back into its original shape. With the taillights properly positioned, where the metal has been bent and warped from the impact, he picks up a specialized body hammer designed specifically for metalworking and approaches the damaged sections with a focused determination. To enhance the straightening process, he skillfully combines the use of the hydraulic puller with the hammer. He prepares to detach the rear bumper from the body of the car, which requires a bit more finesse. He picks up a cutting saw and carefully begins to cut through the welded seams that hold the bumper in place. After completing the cutting, the technician shifts his focus to the electric drill, an essential tool for this stage of the repair. He carefully positions the drill bit against the frame of the car, starting with the areas around the rear door frames. He applies steady pressure as he drills, ensuring that the bit penetrates the metal smoothly. The sound of the drill fills the garage, and he skillfully maneuvers it to focus on critical areas like the rear windshield frame and the mounts for the taillights. After finishing the drilling, the technician grabs a small cutting tool, often referred to as a reciprocating saw, to precisely cut along the edges of the seams around the door frame. Once he has successfully cut around the door area, he transitions to the rear bumper. Next, he crawls into the trunk, accessing the compartment where the spare tire is stored. Using the same small cutting tool, he works to free the bumper from the area that secures it. After removing the rear bumper, the technician reveals several areas of damage that were previously hidden. Noticing the bent metal and compromised structural integrity of the frame, he knows it's time to address these critical repairs. He reaches for a cutting saw to begin separating the damaged sections of the steel frame. Once he has made the necessary cuts, he transitions to using a hydraulic puller to extract the bent steel frame from the vehicle. With a combination of careful pulling, tapping, and drilling, the technician diligently works to free the damaged steel frame. The technician shifts his focus to a smaller piece of metal situated inside the vehicle's structure. He begins by securely fastening the lower edge of the new bumper to the workshop floor, creating a stable base for the next steps. Next, he uses a hydraulic puller to hook onto the upper edge of the bumper. With a control pull, the hydraulic mechanism begins to exert force on the frame, gradually straightening the metal as it's drawn back into its intended shape. He's using the combination of the puller and the hammer to guide the metal back into place. Next, the technician moves into the trunk area to address a section of the steel frame that has become warped. He retrieves the hydraulic puller once again and carefully attaches it to the bent section of the steel. With a firm grip, he begins to apply pressure to pull the metal back into alignment. Once the bent steel section is as straight as possible, he prepares to replace it with a new piece of metal. He retrieves the new steel section and positions it against the old frame. He carefully aligns the end of the new steel piece with the old frame, ensuring a snug fit. After securing the new piece, he prepares his welding equipment. Once he finished welding the entire area, he steps back to review his work. He retrieves a specialized solution designed to protect and strengthen the welds. Next, he sets the plate on a workbench and uses a drill to create a series of holes along the edge of the plate. Once he finished drilling, he carefully positions the steel plate over the newly welded section of the frame. He begins welding at each drilled hole, moving methodically around the perimeter of the plate. The technician moves on to the remaining side of the steel frame, ready to continue the welding process. He carefully positions the new steel section against the old frame, ensuring that everything aligns perfectly. After a few minutes of focused effort, he reaches for his hammer. He gently taps on the welds he's just created, testing their strength. After successfully completing the welding of the two steel plates, the technician shifts his focus to replacing the spare tire compartment. He carefully positions the new compartment into the freshly completed steel frame, ensuring that it aligns perfectly with the surrounding structure. Next, the technician turns his attention to replacing the trunk lid. Before fitting the new trunk lid, he replaces the two supporting struts that hold the trunk open. With the supporting struts in place, he then installs the new trunk lid. He aligns it with the hinges and carefully lowers it into position. Once he is satisfied with the fit, he takes the bolts and begins to tighten them down, securing the trunk lid to the new struts. The technician prepares to replace the rear side trim piece that runs from the door to the rear light. He picks up the saw and begins to trim away any excess material from the new trim piece, making sure to cut carefully along the edges. Once he has made the initial cuts, he holds the new trim piece against the side of the vehicle to check its fit. He marks the spots that require further trimming to achieve a snug fit against the door and the rear light. He takes a closer look at the welds, making minor adjustments where necessary. Using a grinder, he smooths out any rough edges, ensuring a clean and strong bond. He picks up a caulking gun loaded with adhesive and begins to apply a bead of sealant along the perimeter of both the old and new frames. Once everything is properly aligned, with the new frame snugly in place, he prepares to weld the two sections together. He carefully selects his welding equipment and begins to make the initial welds at the key connection points. With the bumper cover positioned correctly, the technician now switches to using a screwdriver to fasten the screws along the sides. He begins to carefully tighten each screw, securing the bumper cover to the side of the vehicle. He begins by using a soft mallet, carefully tapping along the dented areas to gradually restore the frame's original shape. Once he has addressed the dents with the hammer, he applies an adhesive to a piece of sturdy fabric, pressing it firmly onto the side panel. Slowly, he begins to apply tension, carefully guiding the frame back into alignment. With the surfaces now pulled straight, the technician moves on to welding the lower edge of the frame. He begins by securing the edges with a set of sturdy clamps, ensuring they stay firmly in place during the welding process. He lowers the trunk lid, carefully attaching the lock unit. He secures it in place and then aligns the latch, checking to ensure it functions smoothly. He begins by attaching the two mounting brackets on each side of the vehicle, ensuring they're firmly secured. Next, he carefully aligns the bumper with the brackets and pushes it into place, pressing along the edges to lock it securely into the mounting clips. The technician begins by installing the taillights onto the rear of the vehicle, carefully positioning each light to ensure they align perfectly. He presses along the edges, verifying that each taillight is securely in place. Moving to the trunk lid, he installs the center brake light, making sure it sits flush with the surface. After ensuring the bumper and taillights fit perfectly, the technician carefully disassembles them once again to gain access to the inner frame for reinforcement. He begins by welding along the rear edge of the frame. Next, he shifts his attention to the interior area surrounding the spare tire compartment. The technician moves to the next critical area, the side of the door and the small rear frame. He starts by welding along the edge of the door frame. Once he has completed all the welding, he grabs a jar of thin paint, specifically designed for sealing and protecting metal surfaces. He starts at the rear edge of the bumper, carefully applying the paint to the freshly welded seams. Using a brush, he ensures that the paint seeps into all the crevices, covering every inch of the exposed metal. After addressing the rear bumper, he shifts his focus to the areas surrounding the spare tire compartment. Finally, he moves to the door frame, carefully painting over the welds he had just completed. The technician reaches for a can of anti-rust spray to provide an additional barrier against corrosion. Starting with the rear bumper, he sprays a fine, even coat over each weld and into the small gaps and seams. With the anti-rust treatment completed, the technician raises the vehicle. He begins covering every exposed section of the vehicle's frame near the bumper and around the spare tire compartment. Cars are repainted in the paint booth. With the rear of the vehicle now fully coated and protected, the technician prepares to reassemble the final components. He starts by carefully positioning the rear bumper, aligning it with the mounts on both sides of the vehicle. Next, he turns his attention to the taillights. He carefully aligns the trim panel on top of the trunk lid, ensuring it fits perfectly along the edge. Finally, he moves to the rear windshield. The once damaged rear end now gleams, seamlessly integrated with the rest of the vehicle. The panels are flush, the paint is polished, and each part fits as if it just left the factory.